Hi, this is Evelyn Lopez. Welcome to another episode of Sustainability in Your Ear for the Earth911.com podcast for the week of November 4th, 2019. Coming to you from the lovely, if somewhat crispy cold Moonyard recording studios in Tacoma, Washington. This week, we're covering natural ways to get stains out, and we are going to talk about garbage. Garbage in.
Lots of garbage.
Lots of garbage. Garbage, which is entirely appropriate. So welcome.
Well, and you were going to say garbage in, garbage out, which is exactly the problem we have as a society.
I know. I think we make as much, although I think we produce more garbage than we take in, don't we? Like anything you buy comes with packaging too, so you're left with an item, but you've created more garbage than the item that you purchased.
When you add up all the waste, that's true.
Yeah. So welcome, Mitch Ratcliffe, our publisher of Earth911. Mitch, where are you coming to from today?
Well, we're doing the home office thing today, so I'm sitting looking out the backyard. It's a cold morning in Lakewood, Washington.
Yeah, did you have frost this morning?
We did.
Yeah, I thought so too. And also, welcome to our Earth911 writer, Sarah Lozanova. Sarah, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Evelyn.
Great. How are things in Maine?
It's a little cold and dreary, but we're hanging in there.
Oh, that's good. Ready for Halloween?
Yeah, but it's supposed to just absolutely pour, so we're trying to figure out how to trick or treat in that.
Yeah, it's a challenge. That's a challenge.
And for those of you listening, this is recorded the week before, so you've already had Halloween.
Yeah.
We didn't actually miss it.
No, you've already experienced it at the point where you're hearing this. So let's talk, before we get into the down and dirty side of garbage, let's talk a little bit about stains, fabric stains in particular.
Yeah, well, so we had a great piece from Tommy John. It's an infographic, and they're a clothing manufacturer, obviously, but they shared a great infographic on how to get stains out naturally. Mm-hmm. And we thought these were great ideas, so we put them up on the site, and it was our most popular article over the last week.
Yeah, I think this is always a good, timely article. I know anytime I'm wearing a white shirt, I am guaranteed to either spill coffee down my front or be somehow compelled to eat Italian food and drip tomato sauce down my front.
And there's a solution, and that is club soda.
Oh.
You pour a little club soda over that affected area, some table salt, let it sit overnight, and that stain will rinse out when you wash it.
I think I have tried club soda before without a whole lot of success, but I didn't let it sit overnight. So I think the sitting overnight is really important.
Well, and the table salt too.
Okay.
So the combination of salt and the soda.
One thing I like about the infographic is it goes through different types of stains. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you might want to treat blood differently than tomato sauce or oil.
And I'm always covered in blood after a murder spree.
Right.
Well, you never know. You never know. I had just a cut on my finger and ended up with blood all over the work blouse that I was wearing. And sort of at the end of the day, looked at it like, what the heck was I doing today that I got blood all over myself?
Well, you know what there is? A solution.
Is there?
There is.
And
it's to pour white vinegar on the stain, let it soak for 10 minutes, not overnight, then blot the area with a paper towel until the stain disappears. You can scrub the garment with a wet towel after removing the stain to get rid of the vinegar smell.
That's brilliant.
I've also used peroxide, too, with blood and had good results.
Does it sort of bubble the blood out?
I think it kind of bleaches it because peroxide has a bleaching effect.
Mm-hmm.
But would that bleach the fabric as well?
No, you can use it in the wash, like a non-chlorine bleach, and just, a diluted amount of it in the wash.
Huh.
That's really good.
I did not know that. You know what I need is an infographic. So let's talk about grease stains.
And grease stains are actually a real killer, especially on T-shirts. Like if you get pizza grease or something like that. I mean, my husband has ruined somehow, I think almost every T-shirt he has a blob of grease stain on it. And I did not know that there was a solution to that.
Because there is a solution.
And what is it?
You put cornstarch on the stain, let it sit for 15 minutes, then sprinkle water on it to create a paste and rub that paste in, and then you launder the shirt, and the grease stain will be gone.
And I tell you, it's almost worth getting a grease stain just to try out this.
I'm really curious to try that one. I haven't used cornstarch before. I have used dish soap, and that's pretty good at getting grease out.
Yeah, if it's a grease-cutting dish soap. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I also thought that because sweat and yellowing stains, which, if you're especially if you're reusing or using your clothing as long as you can, becomes an issue. And the combination of lemon juice and table salt, which, by the way, is a solution.
Well, and this is good. I don't know.
Will help do that.
If you remember, revealing my age here, many, many years ago, there was a regular TV commercial about ring around the collar. Like, this was the social gaffe of all social gaffes. And what it really meant was, sweat stains around a men's white collar shirt. But it's body oils. So the lemon juice and table salt should work around on that too. Although you never hear about it being a problem these days. And I assume that people wearing shirts still get sweaty necks.
Well, and one of the reasons that it works is that, like peroxide, the lemon juice itself is a bleaching agent. And the other suggestion in the infographic is not simply to rub in the juice and salt and then let it soak and then rub until the stain disappears, but then to air dry in the sun, because the sunlight will make the bleaching power of the lemon juice more effective.
That's a really interesting tip.
I was going to say, another thing I've tried is to mix white vinegar 1-to-1 with either washing soda or borax. So basically to put the borax or the powder on the stain and then to spray vinegar, like a vinegar and water mixture, and then let it sit for about 10 or 20 minutes. And that's been really effective for me in getting stains out too.
And then do you rinse it out and then run it through the wash, or?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My go-tos are pretty simple, and one is just the hint of, you might be tempted to use hot water when you have a stain. Don't. Especially on blood, hot water will set it into the clothing, whereas cold water, you'll be able to rinse blood out. Or if you need to soak something that's gotten blood on it, cold water and salt are the keys. And now we also know that we can try vinegar for fresh blood stains. The other is boiling hot water. If you have, and I'll say it this way, but I'll tell you, I probably sound like, I don't know, some ancient auntie, but if you have wine or fruit stains on your tablecloth or table linens, which I do have table linens, if you boil water and put it in the sink and run the boiling water out of a kettle right onto it, the stain will come right out. Something about boiling water and fruit stains, it breaks it right down.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, for those table linen problems.
Use scrub brushes. Like, I find that a really good way to really scrub at the stain. I'll take like a toothbrush or a scrub brush and then whatever way I'm trying to treat it and then just scrub it. And a lot of times that can do quite a bit. I
think that it's probably because you can get whatever your anti-stain agent down into the fibers of the cloth that way if you're using a scrub brush. Instead you're just sort of treating the surface of it.
Well, these are perennial problems. I don't think it sounds like an old auntie. I think these are simply skills that have been common for centuries.
Yeah.
The challenge is actually making them interesting enough that people want to act on them. And, you don't need to have your clothes wear out. You can take good care of them, and you can do it naturally without impacting the environment. Right.
I think that's really the key. A lot of these old home remedies were from a time where, if you had a nice shirt or a nice dress or a tablecloth, you needed to keep that in good shape because that may be your only item of clothing, a nice item for a long, long time. So a lot of these solutions have been developed to preserve our clothing, and that's a really great ecological way of approaching things too.
Well, I think that with this, we can say safely that stains are a thing of the past for those of you who read the infographic. So check it out on the site.
Yeah. And if you try some of these out and have some feedback, post it on the forum because I think that would be really interesting to know about.
Yeah. And we're getting a lot more posting relative to before. So join in. The conversation is growing.
Excellent.
At the Earthling Forum on Earth911.com.
So let's switch over to now we're going to enter the realm of garbage. And first up is the ubiquitous garbage nightmare, or at least headache, and that is plastic bags. What do you do with them? What are the best options? And, can you dispose of them?
Well, Patti Roth did a story using recycling and disposing of bags responsibly, which had a lot of great information in it. Some things that I had simply not really thought about. One of the most important items in this entire story is the notion that a bag itself is contamination from the perspective of the recyclers. Mm-hmm. So when you put your clean, dry plastics in a bag and put it into recycling, it is immediately treated as contamination and thrown out. So the best thing to do with the recycling bag that you have is to pour the loose the contents into your bin, mm-hmm. and not put them in your bag, because that will literally mean they don't get recycled.
Yeah. Plastic bags are, I think, such a problem. And even if you are doing your best to, bring your reusable grocery bags with you and other bags with you, it just creeps in. As I mentioned, a lot of the packages that you receive, if you get things by mail, will come with, it may come in a cardboard box, but inside, let's say I recently ordered some sweaters, inside each sweater was in its own plastic bag.
Right.
And some of them you can recycle, but not all of them.
That happens a lot with food, too. Like most freezer foods come in bags. Mm-hmm. I don't think my local grocer recycles.
Well, and these films, which is what we're really talking about, are contamination in a couple of dangerous ways for the workers in a recycling facility. They can jam up machines. And when somebody has to climb in and then pull one of these things out, they can get hurt. The other thing is that the plastic bags, the films are, if they're not clear, and actually, if they're bags, it really is the problem. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that something's closed and they can't check what's inside that makes that material immediately be treated as contamination. So, and there are a couple of quotes from people, particularly from Waste Management, saying that any closed plastic bag with items inside is going to be pulled off the line. And that was a real wake-up call, because most of us, even responsible recyclers, tend to think that putting stuff together makes it more useful. And that is not the case with the plastic bag, because both the bag and the lack of insight into what's inside it make that a suspicious piece of garbage.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, too. I had never thought about that, but if you think about it from the material handler's perspective, you can't take the risk of opening up a plastic bag. If a bag is sealed up, it could contain, who knows what.
Yeah, well, and you don't have the time. This
right.
stuff is rushing by you, so your job is to pull the bags off.
Right, so you're
looking for stuff to get out of the stream. Mm-hmm. And so actually sending it through loose is a much better idea. The other assumption that a lot of us make is that these biodegradable bags are going to break down when you put them through the recycling process. But unless they go into an industrial composting facility, they're not going to break down. They're going to remain plastic and end up in the landfill for decades.
Yeah, I would say one of the most interesting things about this article was that it to me, it sort of made me decide that the compostable and biodegradable bags might be more of a marketing strategy than an actual helpful item. Because either they don't break down the way you're hoping they will, or they end up breaking down in no different way than a plastic bag, or, and this is critical too, they may actually break down sooner than you want them to and be more fragile than a plastic bag, so that your garbage that you've put inside them gets dumped, falls out of the garbage truck or somehow, sort of gets out and creates litter.
Yeah, I think the problem is that it's best for them to go through municipal composting facilities that reach high temperatures. But at least for myself, I don't send any of my waste to such a facility. Mm-hmm. I think it's just not applicable for many people.
Yeah, I think
that's really where Patti's article ends up going, is that using fewer bags and reusing the bags that you do take is critical. So if you're getting 10 plastic bags from the grocery store every week, take them back and ask them to use them the next time. Use them until they break. That's one way to reduce the volume. But then the real step is to stop taking bags from the grocer at all. And so, if you are a Trader Joe's customer or a Whole Foods customer, they will sell, nice branded canvas bags to take stuff home in. And that's really where we need to go. There's also options like cotton shopping bags and cloth produce bags. So if you're going to go pick out apples, put them in your own produce bag. You can still weigh them.
Right.
It's not a problem, and you've completely eliminated both the plastic bag that you would have pulled off the roll in the produce aisle, and the plastic bag in which that bag would be put, so you could take it to your car.
Mm-hmm. And the ideal is if you can make those out of waste products. Like I've made produce bags out of old T-shirts, for example, or old sheets. And then you're really removing any waste, because even cotton production is quite environmentally intensive.
Yeah, I've done that too. I've sewn together old linen napkins to make produce bags, and they work great. And they're they look nice too, actually. But I still have a bit of a challenge in remembering to take them with me. I used to keep a bag of bags in my car, but since we got dogs in January, the dogs ate everything in the car. So, so the bags sit in the garage, and I'm supposed to remember to grab them when I head out to the car to go to the store. But yeah, I would say I'm about a 50% success rate.
Another thing too to think about is trying to avoid the use of Ziploc bags, like sandwich bags. I just about don't buy these, and I'll reuse bags. Like I buy some sugar that comes in these nice heavy plastic bags, and I'll reuse those or use food containers instead of Ziploc bags. It's a little less convenient, but it's a great way to save on plastic waste.
And why Ziploc in particular, Sarah? Is it because they have more plastic in them than the other bags?
Or I just mean basically little disposable food bags that we may use. Like that's another place to cut waste too.
Yeah, I agree that it's convenient, but so wasteful.
I'll chime in here too. We use the bags that are inside of cereal boxes because they're very hardy and very strong.
Yeah, they're really hardy.
Yeah, so recycle the cardboard and then keep those bags. And usually if the cereal isn't too goopy or sticky, it just empties out. And it's relatively clean for sandwiches or other food products.
That's a really good idea.
And then use clips to seal them. And yeah, they're very strong.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, you can't even open them. You have to cut them open. Oh, that's a really good idea.
I'd love to find a replacement for garbage bags, because that's one of the bags that I still end up buying are garbage bags. I haven't really found a way around that.
Well, that's an interesting problem. I've been looking at my garbage bags and thinking the same thing, particularly now that I know that they don't break down because I buy the biodegradable ones.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
And, the problem is that pouring the loose garbage, particularly if you have food waste in it, like the meats and things that you throw out that you can't compost, that's both the kind of a health hazard, and it's just plain unpleasant if you don't have them in the bag. So, but the problem is the bags are bad too. So how do we find some sort of new container that would be both sealing, so you wouldn't have to deal with the smell, and would not result in a lot of breakdown in the bin itself, right? So that it gets stinky, and that's an opportunity for somebody to come up with a better bin.
Yeah, yeah,
that would be a great invention.
So, and Patti had a couple of other great points. Now, if you do buy biodegradable bags, the funny thing is they can break down if you put them in, say, for instance, the trunk of your car, so that you can carry them along, because the trunk of the car in a warm area can be so hot that it acts like an industrial compost and breaks down those biodegradable bags before you can even use them. So there's an interesting one I hadn't thought about. She also mentions we all are familiar with the poop scoop bags at the park and many people carry their own. But those bags themselves are not recyclable. So when we toss the poop bag in the trash or into anything, it's not going to end up being recycled. It's going to end up in the landfill. And interestingly, we have lots of definitions about landfills and what landfills are in the next story.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. I have been in the habit of calling our local, and I got to say in Tacoma, I am a huge fan of our environmental services. and would always say, we're going to the dump, we're taking some stuff to the dump, but it's not really a dump at all. It's a landfill. It's a very lovely landfill, actually.
It's a lovely landfill.
It's a beautiful landfill. It's one of my favorite places.
But a lot of people do think that dumps and landfills are the same thing, and they're not. Dumps are literally what we think of which is either holes in the ground or just a place where we pile a lot of garbage and let it essentially rot. Landfills, on the other hand, are managed environments that are constructed to contain the materials that we throw into them from the groundwater as well as releases methane. Mm-hmm. And so a landfill will be generally a hole in the ground that is filled with material each day. And so you can kind of think of it as a set of cells that are being created within the dump. And they will put the day's garbage in, then cover it with 6 to 8 inches of soil. And then the next day they'll put more in next to it, and they'll slowly fill up and cover each day the material in the landfill. And the landfill itself has an LDPE liner, a thick plastic liner that is designed to keep heavy metals and chemicals from leaching into the ground. And even under that, there's a compact layer of clay and a drainage system. So they're also the landfill is designed to pull the leached materials out and store them for processing if need be later on, so they don't end up in the groundwater. And then the final part of this is that they're managing the capture of the methane gas that is produced by landfills, which is the third largest source of methane, human output methane in the world. And so the landfill is a contained environment in which your trash is going to rot, but it's going to rot without creating pollution.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting concept because it's basically taking garbage and making it as inert as possible, like having a little interaction with, the watershed, the water table, and all those kinds of systems that the landfill would otherwise be a part of. Do you know, Mitch, with the methane collection, is it generally flared, or how is the methane?
Well, so it has been generally flared, but I think that a lot of organizations are recognizing that that's not the best use for it, that we could actually put the methane to some additional use. So a lot of it now, I believe, is being directed into cogeneration, or they're capturing the methane for some sort of reuse.
Yeah, I remember hearing about a bunch of projects with that maybe about 10 years ago, where they were using it for cogeneration for heating and generating electricity. I think it depends on the landfill and probably how much they're able to collect and whether or not it makes financial sense.
Well, yeah, and the methane is actually described as landfill gas, or LFG, in the patois of the industry. And this is the largest source of pollution from the landfill. The rest of the leaching of the chemicals and so forth is well contained within the environment, but the methane, when it's released, goes right into the atmosphere. And that's what we need to change as we continue to evolve the idea of the landfill. But the problem is, when you start a landfill, you have essentially it's 11 and a half or 12 years that you can keep the landfill open. And your goal when you plan a landfill is to figure out how to fill it up within that time so that you don't leave a lot of unused space or overflow. Then once the landfill is full, and that is at that arbitrary time frame, you are responsible to manage that landfill for the next 32 years. For leaching, for methane, and all the other things that we've just been talking about. But that's still not even long enough. That landfill is going to produce methane for decades or centuries afterwards. And we've kind of, as we often do, push the problem off to the next generation. Mm-hmm. So 30 years after you close your landfill, or 32 years, you're no longer responsible. And that's where we also need to recognize that none of this trash ever really goes away. It just ends up stored differently. And so we went from dumps throughout the 20th century to landfills, which began to proliferate in the 60s and became a standard in the 1990s for the most part. But this is still trash that is out there in the environment, not being recaptured and reused, and we need to think past that. And so I think Gemma's story does a great job of laying all this out in terms of the consequences, but there's an excellent infographic about the composition of the landfill and how it's built up, that'll give you a really good idea of what is happening to this stuff after you send it off in the garbage truck. Yeah,
I agree. I think that Gemma's article is excellent, and I really appreciate the, sort of cross-section of the landfill, to show all of the different layers and all of the different management techniques. It's, we put a lot of resources into managing our garbage.
We have, and we've been doing it essentially since the beginning of time. And so the last article that we have, also by Gemma, is about understanding where garbage goes. And this is, if you look in the animal world, ant colonies have middens, which are garbage dumps. And they always have them in places that are oriented away from the rest of the colony, but that's where they put their dead, and that's where they put any waste materials they have. We have done the same thing. Archaeologists have studied middens in order to understand our predecessors for decades. Our garbage is one of those signatures that lasts for eons, like we were saying. And now, there was actually municipal garbage collection in Rome around the first century. So this is something that we've been doing for thousands of years in various levels of organization. And what Gemma's other article does is talk about some of the new ways that we can take care of things. Now, one of those is incineration, which is increasingly popular and has some problems. I mean, when we incinerate garbage now, it's not released into the environment in the same way that you think of a smokestack just pouring stuff out. The exhaust is scrubbed, so the harmful materials, chemicals, heavy metals, and things like that are not released. And in an ideal situation, it should be clean air coming out at the end of the day, but it's not going to leave something that is completely benign. The fly ash that is left after you burn garbage is toxic because it does have heavy metals and chemicals in it that aren't destroyed by the fire. You can use fly ash to make concrete, but you can't use fly ash to do much of anything else. It's not a productive thing for us to be outputting as a society. So that's one of the ways that people have, over the last 30 to 50 years, tried to improve the way we get rid of it. They think this is actually getting rid of it, but it still leaves a highly concentrated residue of pollution. And this is the problem with incineration. There are a lot of new technologies coming out that build on the idea of using heat. And one of them is called pyrolysis, which is a way of reducing plastic back to its component chemicals. And you do that in a hot environment. It's not like burning, but you raise the heat so much that it starts to break down. It's around 400 to 500 degrees. And generally, that's done in repurposed concrete kilns. It's interesting that we're going back and using some of the old infrastructure to create these new opportunities. We're also doing degasification, depolymerization. In other words, breaking the materials down into the polymers that they're made of is another big opportunity that is just starting to be explored. And I've heard some companies talk about this at the level that they're thinking about essentially inventories of molecules that they're trying to pull back out of the stuff that they've made in the first place or that somebody else made. And then they want to resell those molecules, the polymers and the monomers that polymers are made up of, as raw materials to producers and new products. And so there's a lot of really interesting new opportunities for taking our trash and turning it into something that can be used in the future, which is something we've never done as a species, and no species has done. So maybe that's our hope.
It could be. I mean, all of these things really, it's, when we're looking to business to take care of it rather than municipal government, it's a question of, is there a profit in it? Are the costs, will the costs come down enough so that whatever profit can be realized is enough to make it all work?
And there's a couple of different models for that. The municipal programs are generally contracted out to third-party companies like Waste Management or Recology or Republic Services. Those are the big three. But some counties and cities actually employ their own staff. And in that case, there isn't a profit motive involved, but you have to do it at a reasonable cost. And it is all about economics in the long term. Somebody has to be able to be paid to do this. It costs money to recycle. It costs money to get rid of our garbage. We've sort of ignored that when we talk about the price of things. We need to price that into everything that we buy and sell. And that would probably change our throwaway society simply by, making us more aware of the cost of what we're doing.
Yeah.
It would also make it cheaper for corporations to utilize recollected materials. Patagonia makes fleece out of recycled bottles, or Interface Carpet uses waste product from existing carpets to make new carpets. But, the more that there is an incentive, if it was more expensive to dispose of waste, like if we were paying more the actual price, because like you said, Mitch, if we're putting things in a landfill and basically saying, oh, my grandkids can worry about this, then, there's a cost, but we're passing that cost on instead of absorbing it ourselves. So if we absorbed it ourselves, I think some of the solutions that right now seem expensive would make a lot more financial sense.
Yeah, and that's the interesting question, is how do we change the way we think about the value of all this stuff? And we know that the garbage is a problem.
And we're not paying the actual cost of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Air pollution, or a lot of things like, the people that are getting asthma are paying the actual cost, but, the coal plants aren't.
And the problem with our society, the way it's structured now, is then somebody sues because they suffered from asthma as a result of this, and that adds to the cost for everybody. And at the same time, we don't make any real progress on solving the problem. What we've done is address the victims of it, but without saying, how do we change this? And because we've continued to deregulate rather than to increase regulations. And you can do so not by making laws people go to jail for violating, but that for which they pay economic fines for violating. These standards are the basis of our ability to trust that things are safe, that they're being taken care of responsibly. All that is we've just ignored, and it's time to take a full accounting of our impact. Yeah,
and really have a systemic change.
Yeah. I mean, there are different philosophies. I would say, to speak on behalf of the torts attorneys, that sometimes the class action lawsuits in some ways have caused more industry change than regulation.
Yeah, Ralph Nader's organization, simply by making these issues around auto safety and about pollution visible, changed the way that we regulate those industries. We wouldn't have seatbelts without them. We wouldn't have airbags. We wouldn't have lots of the things that we now take for granted, which were the process or the product of legal, smart lawyers doing good things. And there's no problem with lawyers per se. There's a problem with people who help ignore the costs, and that's the real problem.
I think that's it. And I think that for me, the difficulty is that we have emphasized sort of bargains, like, look how inexpensive this is. Look, I can get, 3 of these instead of 1. If I go to this store or that store, I can get 10 for this price. And then that creates just more waste.
Yeah. It was a deal.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. You simply pushed the cost off onto somebody else.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, your grandchildren are already pissed off.
That's right.
And that I think is why we're at a point where we're going to see some real change. The last idea on the landfills is that, we kind of have this idea that we can just make new landfills, but they take 1,600 acres in many cases. And that's a lot of space. And that kind of space is only available out in the country away from the city. So now you're sending stuff further. So you're paying more to just put it somewhere where it's going to be ignored. And we really need to rethink why we throw stuff away. And that's where, when you talk about, when somebody says, well, we can just build more landfills, it won't be as economically viable because they'll be further and further away from where people are in order to simply be economically, you couldn't even start without having the right cost structure. And because we are turning all our land around cities into residential and business space, that property is becoming so expensive it can no longer be used for landfills.
Yeah.
And we don't need these in national forests. So where are we going to put them? And when you think, oh, we can keep throwing stuff away, we can keep on business as usual, ask yourself the question, how close do you want to live to a landfill? And that's the definition of your tolerance for change. We either need to change the way we throw stuff away, or we need to decide we're ready to live in a world filled with garbage. And if you've ever seen the movie Idiocracy, where there's a garbage landslide, that could potentially be something that we actually live through.
Most states, or at least I know in the state of Maine, there's over 400 capped landfills that are just that just need to hang out. There's almost no development options for them. Solar is one development option, and I think it's possible to have some hiking trails on them, and that's about it. Like there's very few development options.
And you're hiking through an environment where there's still landfill gas being released. It isn't necessarily a safe place.
Yeah, and it's a very altered landscape. If it has what you were talking about, the lining, the clay liner, and the plastic, and all these things, it's not responding the way that soil normally would.
No. Well, and the idea that, we can pave over the world, it was a joke 40, 50 years ago, but that seems to be where we still are headed. And we've got to stop that.
Yeah. Well, before we get to Earthling questions, Mitch, I want to ask you about any recent interviews that are newly up on the website or coming up soon.
Yeah, well, we've had a whole bunch of innovator interviews, and they've been fascinating. One of the ones that, and this is something that all of us can relate to right now because we're watching the fires in California, and we've certainly seen hurricanes all through the summer that have destroyed lives and livelihoods. Dr. Reggie Ferrara, who is the Associate Director of the Traumatology Institute at Tulane University's School of Social Work, joined the show to talk about the stress caused by climate change. And he's been studying this since Tulane's based in New Orleans. And so they lived through Hurricane Katrina. He talks about how both the psychology industry and the community psychology in particular is being reoriented around a sort of a strike force approach to solving these major crises. And so they fly in and to help a lot of people from all over the country after a disaster. But we actually need something within these communities that's more resilient so that they're better able to help one another, especially in the interim between the time when the disaster happens and when help can arrive. And it's a fascinating conversation for a variety of reasons. And it left me thinking about how all the stress that we're experiencing in the United States right now is in some sense being exacerbated by the uncertainty of weather-related disasters, which are increasing. So it's a really interesting interview to think through. We also talked with Nathan Rothstein, who's the co-founder of Project Repat, and this is a company that lets you take your old T-shirts, we were talking about them earlier, once they're either too stained or so memorable you can't throw them away. You can send them to Project Repat and they'll make them into a quilt. And they've done thousands of these quilts and have kept 11,000 pounds of T-shirts out of landfills at the same time. So it's an interesting way to think about reusing something not as a shirt, but as a quilt. And finally, we talked about baru seeds, which is a sustainably harvested natural nut from the Cerrado of Brazil, the high savanna where most of the water that flows into the Amazon ultimately starts out. Baru seeds have been harvested by indigenous peoples, and now they are being distributed in the United States by Organic Traditions. And we talked with Ali Mamaleader, who is the director of their business development group, about the baru seed, which tastes like peanuts, has no peanut allergy characteristics at all, and can be used as a replacement for peanuts in all sorts of food. So, and I had a few. They're delicious. They're a striking nut. They're kind of mahogany colored when you before you bite into them, and you get to the white meat. And as I said, they taste kind of like peanuts and cashews, a little bit of both. So it's an interesting new product, and we thought would be worth talking about.
Oh, very interesting. Those all sound really good. Earthling questions. We have a couple of good ones. First up is Bill. Bill in New York asks, I use daily disposable contact lenses. So every day I toss 2 lenses, the 2 plastic containers they come in, and the 2 foil covers on the containers. All of them are too small for curbside recycling. They would literally slip through the cracks of the sorters and be seen as debris. I can't find anything on your site with advice on how to recycle them. Any suggestions?
Well, so this is an increasing issue as people turn to more disposable products like contact lenses. So first, let's focus on what people usually do with these, and that's flush them down the toilet.
Yeah.
These are plastic, and so when you put that into the water supply, they're going to break down throughout the process, and the smallest microplastics will get through the filtering process, so you are polluting the water. So you should not dispose of contact lenses in the toilet. Now, there are not a lot of recycling programs, but Bausch & Lomb has partnered with TerraCycle, our often mentioned reference. They do all sorts of branded recycling programs with mail-in boxes that you purchase from them, and then they process them. They're working with Bausch & Lomb on the 1x1 program, which basically allows you to send not only the contact lens, but the blister packs they come in for recycling. And they reuse these as part of their BioTrue one-day products. So if you get BioTrue contact lenses, these are actually partly recycled in some cases. They will take all brands of contact lenses as well. So if you have disposable contact lenses and you want to responsibly recycle them, send them to TerraCycle, and you can get that information at TerraCycle.com.
Okay. Yeah, I wear contact lenses that I dispose of every 2 weeks. And so I've thought the same thing. And at one point I did try to put the little foil pieces and the plastic pieces into my curbside recycling, and then, and then learned that no, don't do that, because they don't work in the recycling system at all.
Well, there are answers, but what we need to be pushing when we purchase this kind of product is that there be a recycling option.
Yeah, which I am in agreement with 100%. But I also, know that often there's one contact lens that works for your eyes, and so you may not have a whole lot of consumer choice. But definitely, asking
still
about
tell
it.
them.
Exactly, definitely asking is a help. Okay, Rick in Texas asks. Oh, this one also hits close to home for me. How can I recycle my cat food cans? They are aluminum, but my recycle centers will not take them. What can I do with them? I have thrown them away because they won't take them. And is there any way I can turn my recycle center in for not taking my cat food cans?
Well,
no.
So unfortunately, no. There's no way that you can prosecute the recycling center. But this is also where your role as a citizen is important, right? If you lobby your city government to say that they should be taking these materials, and you demonstrate that you can clean them, because that's our responsibility as the consumer, is to clean out the packaging so that it can be recycled. And when people do this, it's extremely effective. I mean, we have an overall about 28.5% recycling rate in the United States if you don't count composting. It takes it up to about 34.5%. When people do the sorting and the cleaning, those materials are easy to recycle, and aluminum cat food cans are easy to recycle. The problem is that they often arrive at the recycling facility dirty, and so cleaning them and putting them into the aluminum bin with your recycling program is a perfectly viable way to go. Yes. If you don't believe that your recycling center will take that, do check our search engine at search.earth911.com, and we'll be able to tell you whether or not you can drop aluminum cans in your recycling.
Yeah, and I would say to Rick in particular, ask a lot of questions, because I have a couple of cats and I do recycle my cat food cans. Let me tell you, we've got a whole process. I clean them thoroughly, and then they get dried on the dish drainer, so they're clean and they're dry when the cans go into the recycle bin. But I do not recycle the lids because they have sharp edges and they can be harmful to the people who are handling the working on the materials recycling line.
Yeah, right. But you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I literally, asked questions to get down to this is the way I should be doing, recycling for this particular product. And they will tell you, but a lot of times the short answer is either no or that doesn't work. And you really do need to ask a lot of questions to figure out what you can do.
So you know what I've found? The best place to get those answers is if you go to the recycling center. And I end up going to the recycling center every couple of weeks because mostly of all the Amazon boxes we get. But there's always 2 or 3 people who they're volunteers or they're employees, but they are there to help you figure out what you can recycle. So if you don't know what to do with something like your cat food cans, take them along with you to the recycling center and just ask. And they'll tell you exactly how to handle them.
Yeah.
Or they'll tell you you can't recycle them. And then you can ask why.
Yes.
And if aluminum is not easily recyclable, nothing is. It's the most recycled material on Earth.
No, I agree.
73% of the aluminum ever recovered is still in use. So there's no reason we should not be recycling.
Right, which is excellent. And so finally, Shirley on Facebook asks, am I allowed to put hardened acrylic paint in the garbage?
Well, the answer is yes. And unfortunately, there's no recycling process for acrylic paint. So you need to let it harden. If you have latex paint, you should put cat food in or cat litter in that and let that harden. Both of those materials, once they have been dried out like that, can be sent to the trash. But again, it's going to end up in the landfill. So try to figure out how to reuse the paint, donate the paint, do anything other than just send it to the trash.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've got a guide at Earth911. Search on how to recycle paint.
Perfect. All right.
Well, it's another week, another set of great questions.
Another set of excellent questions. Well, anything else before we wrap up, Mitch?
No, we're looking forward to a beautiful fall and early winter, and we'll be covering lots of actionable items. We're putting together a 10-year plan for cutting your carbon footprint by 80% or more. And it's made up of annual steps and monthly steps and weekly steps you can take. And that's something that we're in the midst of preparing now.
Oh, that sounds great. I look forward to that. All right. Well, thanks for listening to Sustainability in Your Ear. We hope you will tune in. We record generally every other week. And you can find all of our conversations on Earth911.com. You can send us an email if you'd like, feedback at Earth911.com, and find us on all of your podcast platforms. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.